So it has now been 6 years since Tay-K was sentenced to 55 years in prison for his part in the murder of a 21-year-old named Ethan Walker after a botched home invasion that was supposed to be a robbery but went left. At the time, the internet was on fire with stories about this kid who was participating in these criminal activities and then making music about it, but since his conviction back in 2019, there really hasn't been many updates on his story until here recently, as Tay-K is back on trial again, facing very similar charges for a separate incident that resulted in the death of a 23-year-old photographer named Mark Anthony Saldivar, who died during a robbery outside of a Chick-fil-A restaurant in San Antonio, Texas. A robbery that took place while Tay-K was on the run from authorities for his first murder case.
I was trying to beat a case, but I ain't beat that case, bitch, I did the race.
Now, I've been seeing a lot of confusion online about this, with people saying stuff like Tay-K's been on trial since I was 12 and I'm 20 now, or didn't they already find him guilty in 2019? Why am I still seeing pics and videos of his court hearings? What else is left to decide? So I figured it's time to clear the air and break down exactly what's going on with Tay-K from the beginning, so it all makes sense, whether you're new to the story or just a little fuzzy on the details. Now, Tay-K's legal problems kicked off way back in 2016, and it started when he was what some would call a bystander in the fatal shooting of a 20-year-old university student named Sarah Mutchliner. Sarah was killed after a New Year's Eve party in Denton, Texas that Tay-K and his homies were performing at. Tay-K was in the car with one of his homies named Eric Johnson, also known as Santana Sage, who was a fellow member of their rap group, the Daytona Boys. Santana was also a U.S. Marine at the time of this incident. The story goes like this: they were riding around after the party that they were performing at when another car pulled up next to them, filled with people who were also at the same party. Tay-K and Santana started yelling out the window, basically harassing the people in the other car, saying inappropriate stuff, mostly aimed at the girls inside of the other car. Things escalated quickly, an argument broke out, and then Santana pulls out a gun and starts letting off shots. One of those shots hit Sarah in the head, killing her instantly. Now, Tay-K wasn't charged in this case, as police said that he was just a quote-unquote a bystander, but his homie Santana Sage got arrested, charged, and eventually was sentenced to 44 years in prison for that shooting.
Denton police say they have identified the passengers riding with a drive-by murder suspect accused of killing a 20-year-old UNT student. We're now getting the first look at the SUV involved in the murder and a closer look at the victim, Sarah Mutchlechner's vehicle.
I'm going to really look up to me and appreciate me, what I do for them. I appreciate you as well, and that's why I'm still here.
20-year-old Marine Corporal Eric Jamal Johnson, seen in a recently posted YouTube video, unclear when the interview was recorded, talking about setting a good example for younger guys. He says he was a gangbanger before he got into painting and drawing.
I stopped for a while. I wasn't banging. I'm still certified regardless, but I stopped banging for a while.
Police say they've now identified the other 4 people who were in this 2007 Honda Pilot New Year's morning when UNT student Sarah Mutchlechner was shot in the head after a verbal altercation on the road between people in her car and those with Johnson. For now, the others with him not facing charges.
They may have taken part in the banter back and forth, but whether or not they knew that he was going to commit a violent act or an illegal act, we have to determine that as well.
Police searched the SUV but aren't saying what was recovered. They do say they're confident Johnson was the one who rolled down the driver's side window, firing the fatal shot.
I've been robbed of seeing her graduate. I've been robbed of being a grandmother. I've been robbed.
34 years. That's the sentence that was handed down today to a Marine who was convicted of killing a UNT student. On Monday is when this all unfolded. Jurors found Eric Johnson guilty of shooting Sarah Mutchlechner on New Year's Day back in 2016. The Denton County District Attorney confirmed on Twitter that Johnson will be eligible for parole based on the sentence after serving 22 years of the 44 I mentioned. The jury could have sent him to prison for life.
Although TK was able to walk away from this case scot-free, this would only be the beginning of TK's problems, as shortly after this, he would be involved in another incident that would eventually lead to him being sentenced to 55 years in prison. So only 6 months after that incident right there, in July of 2016, TK would be involved in a home invasion that ended with a 21-year-old man named Ethan Walker being shot and killed at his house in Mansfield, Texas. The story behind this case is that TK, who was only 16 at the time, and several accomplices had plotted to rob the occupants of a house that they believed had drugs and money stashed inside. The plan was simple. 2 women, a woman named Megan Holt, who was 19, and another woman named Ariana Barat, who was 20, were supposed to seduce a 17-year-old named Zachary Belote. Once they gained his trust, the idea was for them to then unlock the doors and let TK and a couple of other guys come inside, armed and ready to rob the place. But once they got inside, things went left. A fatal confrontation broke out. Both Zachary and his friend Ethan Walker were shot. Zachary survived this incident, but Ethan Walker did not. TK later admitted to his role in this crime during a 2.5-hour police interrogation, where he claimed that he only went there to steal, not to kill, and insisted that he wasn't the one who fired the shot. He didn't name names or snitch on the other people, but investigators would eventually figure it out. A man named Lotharian Merritt was identified as the one who fired the fatal shot that killed Ethan Walker. A man named Sean Robinson was the one who fired and shot Zachary Belote, the man who survived. Because of TK's age and the fact that he wasn't the shooter, the court showed him a little bit of leniency at first. In January of 2017, almost a year after the shooting, he was released from juvenile detention and allowed to be placed on house arrest while he waited for a court date in March of 2017. That hearing was to decide if he was going to be tried as a juvenile or as an adult, but just days before the hearing, TK made his move. He cut off his ankle monitor and decided to dip. He even went over on Twitter and made this post right here that said, "Fuck this house arrest shit. Fuck 12. 12 is slang for the police." He said, "They gonna have to catch me. That's on hood." And just like that, TK was gone. But instead of laying low, TK kept digging a deeper hole for himself. Now, he wasn't just a murder suspect, he was a fugitive in a nationwide manhunt, and he was still out committing crimes. On April 23rd, 2017, while on the run, TK got caught up in another robbery, and this one also ended in somebody dying. The victim this time was a man named Mark Anthony Saldivar, a 23-year-old photographer from San Antonio, Texas. According to prosecutors, TK and another man lured Saldivar into a black SUV under the pretense of doing a photo shoot, but the real goal was to steal his camera equipment. Saldivar caught on and tried to escape. He got out of the SUV and started yelling for help. TK then allegedly tried to run him over, but Saldivar jumped on the hood of the car, kicking the windshield, and at that point, TK got out of the car, pulled out a gun, and shot Saldivar once, killing him. Then TK fled the scene.
New on the night beat, one man found dead in the middle of a parking lot of a North Side fast food restaurant following a shooting. As Pilar Arias reports tonight, police say the car the victim was riding in may also be the same vehicle the suspects took off in.
The parking lot of a Chick-fil-A turned crime scene. The restaurant closed for business like it usually is on Sundays. But that didn't stop witnesses and spectators from gathering to figure out what happened at the lot just across from North Star Mall early this evening.
So this is a shopping center. There were quite a few people out here, and the car drove through like everybody else, and as soon as they heard the noise, they all started looking.
Police now trying to find out how this all happened. Their sights set on a black four-door car. They say the victim was riding in the car along with several other people police are now looking for. They had pulled in here just before 5:30. As far as investigators know at this point, the man was shot outside the vehicle, but they don't know what made him want to get out.
This is the case that TK is currently on trial for in 2025, and it's the reason why you're seeing his name all over social media again. However, this wasn't the last of TK's crimes. Just 1 month later, on May 25th, 2017, TK allegedly attacked and robbed a 65-year-old man named Owen Pepe in Cravens Park in Arlington, Texas. Authorities allege that TK held a gun to the 65-year-old man's head before knocking him unconscious in the park, where he was later found by somebody that was jogging. This man later identified TK during a photo lineup.
A 65-year-old man is out of the hospital and recovering at home tonight after being robbed and beaten in an Arlington park.
Skip Pepe says he was walking in Cravens Park 2 weeks ago in the middle of the day when a young man pulled a gun on him. Pepe says the man quickly turned violent. Police are still looking for the suspect. Fox 4's Brandon Todd is in Arlington tonight with more on the story. Brandon.
Yeah, and Arlington police say they do have an increased presence in those neighborhoods around Cravens Park, specifically off of Silo Road. That's where that 65-year-old man says another man robbed him and then tried to kill him.
Hand me your wallet. You know, the second time it was, I have a gun, hand me your wallet.
65-year-old Skip Pepe was on this walking trail in Cravens Park 2 Thursdays ago, broad daylight. At first, he thought the young man with the gun was joking.
I looked at him and I says, get the hell out of here.
It happened just feet from houses, just a few yards from cars passing on Silo Road.
And I was trying to make my way, not running, but, you know, walking real fast. And I'm waving him, trying to wave him down and say, you know, stop, I'm being robbed, help me. And that's the last thing I remember.
Arlington police say Pepe was assaulted and robbed. These are pictures of him just hours after the attack. He has bleeding on the brain, numerous scrapes and bruises, and 3 fractured ribs. He says he may have been dragged. His wife used to walk with him. Now both are scared to even leave the house.
I look at my husband and I can't get the anger out of me. How dare somebody do this to another person?
Arlington police released this sketch of the attacker from the witness who found Pepe. Officers are now stepping up patrols near the park.
We have close patrol out there both in cars and on foot. And we've canvassed the area, we've talked to witnesses, and we're really determined to get this guy.
We got to find this man. We got to get him off the streets. He's going to hurt somebody else.
I mean, this guy, to me, it was attempted murder, not, assault.
After this incident, Tay-K left Texas and fled to New Jersey, where he would try to lay low. Once he was in New Jersey, he would drop his now infamous song, The Race, where he talked about being on the run and even posed with the picture of his wanted poster. The song climbed up the Billboard charts, peaking at number 44 out of 100 and creating a massive buzz around Tay-K and the crimes that he had committed. It didn't take long after this for the police to catch up with him though, and on the same day that he dropped the music video for The Race, June 30th, 2017, U.S. Marshals arrested him and took him into custody. When they took him in, Tay-K claimed to have downed a whole bottle of prescription pills, so instead of taking him to lockup, they took him to the hospital. However, it was found out that nothing was wrong with him and that the story was fabricated, and after they discovered that, Tay-K made the claim that he was hearing voices in his head. It didn't stop him from being locked up though, and in October of the same year, Tay-K was hit with an additional capital murder charge over the incident where he robbed and killed the photographer. He was extradited back to Texas, where he was awaiting trial for the murder of Ethan Walker, and while in pretrial detention, he was charged with a 3rd-degree felony for possessing a prohibited item in a correctional facility after he was caught with a cell phone. A judge noted that he also had concerns about Tay-K because Tay-K had allegedly tried to start a gang called the Rugrats while he was in jail. It took almost a year for trial to start in the Ethan Walker case, and Tay-K was the last person to be sentenced, so he had to watch as every other person was convicted. The first accomplice, who was a 17-year-old female whose name was never disclosed because of her age, was convicted for her role as the mastermind behind the home invasion. Apparently, she was having a relationship with one of the guys that were victimized. She was found guilty of capital murder and aggravated robbery, and in February of 2018, a judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Ethan Walker's family felt that 20 years was lenient, with Ethan Walker's mother saying, "We would have been more comfortable with 40 years, but we were relieved that it wasn't just probation." In May of 2018, Lotharian Merritt, identified as the gunman who fatally shot Ethan Walker, stood trial. A jury convicted Merritt of capital murder, and he was automatically sentenced to life in prison without parole. On August 30th, 2018, Sean Robinson pleaded guilty to murder for his role in the home invasion in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence. sentence. Robinson had originally been charged with capital murder, but prosecutors allowed the lesser murder plea because Robinson was not the shooter of Walker. Rather, he was the person accused of shooting the other victim, Zachary Belote, who survived. By pleading guilty to murder under the law of parties, which is a felony murder doctrine, Robinson avoided a potential life sentence. On August 24th, 2018, two female accomplices, Megan Holt and Ariana Barat, struck plea deals with prosecutors in exchange for their cooperation, meaning that they agreed to testify against the remaining defendants. That included Tay K, and the capital murder charges against them were dropped. Ariana Barat, who was 22, pled guilty to aggravated robbery and received a 25-year sentence. Under her plea deal, she was required to testify against Tay K and the remaining defendants. Megan Holt, who was 21, likewise pled guilty to aggravated robbery and received a 20-year sentence in exchange for truthful testimony. Her deal was a little bit more favorable because she started cooperating earlier. In November of 2018, Jalen Bell, who was also known as Pimps, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated robbery and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Jalen Bell, like Tay K, was a juvenile at the time of the crime, and his plea allowed him to avoid a murder charge. Then on July 15th, 2019, Tay K's trial started in this case, and at the outset, Tay K pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated robbery for the non-fatal offenses against the victims in the house. However, he pleaded not guilty to capital murder for the death of Ethan Walker and not guilty to an additional aggravated robbery charge related to the shooting of Zachary. Over several days of testimony, jurors heard from witnesses, including Zachary, the guy who got shot but survived, and the other co-defendants. Tay K's song, The Race, which he recorded and released while he was a fugitive, was introduced as evidence during the sentencing phase due to its lyrics bragging about evading capture. On July 19, 2019, only 4 days after his trial started, the jury found Tay K guilty of murder, a lesser offense than capital murder, in the death of Ethan Walker, and guilty of aggravated robbery involving Zachary. He was acquitted of capital murder, which would have meant life without parole, and instead was convicted on the lesser murder charge. At 19 years old, Tay K was sentenced to 55 years in prison for the murder of Ethan Walker. He also received 30 years for the aggravated robbery of Zachary and 13 years each for the 2 other aggravated robbery counts for the other victims that were in the house. All sentences were set to run concurrently, totaling an effective 55-year prison sentence, of which he would have to serve half of, which is approximately 28 years, before he would be eligible for parole. The fact that he was a juvenile when it went down is what allowed him to even be eligible for parole at all. If he had been tried as an adult, he would not have been eligible for parole at all. Tay K will not be able to get out of prison on these charges that he was convicted of until at least 2047. But that was just the first case, the case that everybody is familiar with. However, as I've established throughout this video, there are other crimes which he has yet to be sentenced for. In November of 2019, a few months after his conviction for the Ethan Walker murder, Tay K was indicted by a grand jury for capital murder in the killing of Mark Saldivar, the photographer who was shot outside Chick-fil-A. He has been pending trial on this case ever since. So for 6 years, he's been waiting on his trial in this case. But on March 31st, 2025, jury selection officially began. Opening statements and testimony started on April 1st, and the case has been unfolding in the San Antonio court system and has garnered some significant coverage. Tay K, who's now 24 years old, is being tried as an adult in this case. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and so far his best defense has been to try to discredit or cast doubt on the witnesses and evidence by claiming the investigation was lazy or flawed, suggesting that there's no physical evidence like DNA or fingerprints tying Tay K to pulling the trigger aside from eyewitness accounts, and they say that the eyewitnesses have a reason to testify against Tay K because it can give them a more favorable outcome.
Robbed of his passion and fatally shot for fighting to get it back. That's how the prosecution describes what happened to Mark Anthony Saldivar back in April of 2017.
It is what we heard on the first day of the murder trial for Texas rapper Tay K. His real name is Tamor McIntyre, and he was 16 when he was accused of killing Saldivar.
How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
It's been more than 7 years since Tamor McIntyre was arrested and later charged with the capital murder of 20-year-old Mark Anthony Saldivar. Saldivar fatally shot in a Chick-fil-A parking lot right across from North Star Mall after allegedly having his camera equipment stolen.
He was an up-and-coming rapper that contacted Mark about this photo shoot.
Prosecutor Jason Garahan says inside the vehicle with McIntyre were 3 other people, and at some point they demanded Saldivar's backpack.
This man right over here pulled out a gun and turned around and started hitting with fists and also with the gun, telling him, give me your stuff, give me your stuff. See that passenger door open up, the front passenger door open up, where this man over here was sitting with that gun. He leans out, he shoots Mark.
The defense says all the people in the vehicle will testify about what happened, but their testimony is not consistent, and there was never any evidence Saldivar even had camera equipment with him.
You'll hear testimony from one of the cooperating co-defendants, one of the accomplices, that the photo shoot that he just described had been called off, and that they were just giving this guy a ride. There's no camera recovered in this case.
The defense even implying they have ballistic evidence that doesn't match what the state has.
This conflicting evidence, it's worth the wait.
Those were basically the opening statements from both the defense and the prosecution, and as you can hear, the defense is going to try their hardest to cast doubt on the case. But the very first day of trial seen 4 witnesses get called to the stand, one of which was this girl named Joanna Reyes, who described herself as Tay-K's girlfriend. She was also the driver of the vehicle and has also been charged in this case, but she turned state witness and provided a detailed, emotional account of the crime. She got on the stand and testified that Tay-K asked her to find a photographer to document his time on the run. She contacted Saldivar through Instagram and arranged a meeting. She said she picked up Saldivar along with Tay-K, this dude Jalen Bell, and another friend named Jeremiah Robinson, and then they went to meet Saldivar. She says that during their drive, Tay-K demanded Saldivar's backpack at gunpoint, and when Saldivar resisted, Tay-K and the others began to beat him. She says that Saldivar was dragged out of the car and clung onto the hood, at which point Tay-K threatened her to get him off the car. When she was unable to do so, Tay-K then opened the car door and shot Saldivar, killing him on the spot. Now this chick Reyes has identified Tay-K in court as the gunman and recounted being in fear of her own life when Tay-K pointed the gun at her during the entire incident.
And Tamor took out his gun and pointed it at Mark and asked for his bag. Mark refused to give him the bag, so they all started hitting him, and Tamor was hitting him with the gun, and the whole time I didn't look back, but when I did, I saw his face, and I started telling them to let him go, and I just kept screaming, let him go. And Jalen opened the door and started pushing him out. And he was fighting to get back in the car. And then I didn't let him in the car. So he went around the car and he jumped on the hood. And then the light turned green.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop you right there, okay?
Okay.
So, when you all were at the light on McCullough, you said Tamor produced his gun, correct?
Yes.
And who did Tamor have the gun pointed at?
Mark.
And what was Tamor saying when he had the gun pointed at Mark?
To give him his bag.
And so, once the light turned green, what happened?
He pointed the gun at me and told me to start driving. So I started driving. I didn't know where to go, so I turned into the first place that I saw, which was the Chick-fil-A. Once I turned into the Chick-fil-A, he kept yelling at me to get him off the car. I didn't know how to, so I was just going back and forth really quickly. And then Mark kicked the windshield, and TK opened the door and shot him.
If TK is convicted of capital murder in this case, the sentence for him would be an automatic life term with parole eligibility only after 40 years, meaning that he would not be able to get out of prison until 2067, even if the sentences from this case and his last case run concurrent. But whether it's concurrent or consecutive will be completely up to the judge's discretion. Now, the trial is still ongoing at this time, and there are more witnesses and experts expected to testify. So as of now, there is no verdict that has been received or reached, but I do expect TK is probably going to be found guilty of these charges, and even that still won't mark the end to his legal journey, because I believe he still has to be tried for the attack and robbery on the 65-year-old man in Arlington, you know. But that's what we got. That's the story, man. It looks like TK is cooked again, you know. So y'all gotta let me know what y'all think about all of this in the comments down below. But anyways, that's basically it for the video, guys. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, tap the notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a video. As always, it's been fun rocking with y'all, man. I'm out.